Captain Kalen Vance stared through the viewport at the stark, unforgiving landscape of Terminus Station's host asteroid. Dust storms whipped across the surface, carrying minerals worth billions of credits. The reason everyone tolerated this godforsaken outpost in the first place. He sighed, wiping condensation from the reinforced glass with a callous thumb. 5 years ago, he'd been piloting prestigious diplomatic vessels through the central systems. Now, he shuttled mining equipment and surly workers to and from a glorified rock at the edge of Sector Gamma. One mistake. That's all it had taken to exile him here. Captain Vance, a voice crackled over his comm unit. Your cargo manifest requires authorization before departure. Kalen suppressed a groan. On my way, Control. The corridors of Terminus were perpetually coated in a thin film of mineral dust, despite the expensive filtration systems. Workers in stained jumpsuits shouldered past him without acknowledgement. Everyone here was running from something or someone. Terminus didn't attract the ambitious. It collected the desperate and the disgraced. When the doors to the administration sector hissed open, Kalen nearly collided with her. Dr. Elara Vance. No relation to himself, though the shared surname had sparked plenty of tired jokes during her first weeks on station. She clutched a tablet to her chest, her eyes widening slightly at their near collision. Captain, she acknowledged with a curt nod. Those eyes, unusual violet with flecks of silver, never quite met his. Dr. Vance, he replied, attempting a smile. How's the mysterious plant life treating you today? Her research on the indigenous fungi and lichen-like organisms of the asteroid was the only thing approaching legitimate scientific inquiry on Terminus. Everything else was extraction, profit, and exploitation. They're plants, Captain, not pets, she said, though the corner of her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. They don't treat me any particular way. Something about Dr. Elara Vance had fascinated Kalen since her arrival 6 months ago. It wasn't just her beauty, though she possessed that in abundance, with her copper-gold hair and those remarkable eyes. It was the puzzle of her, a brilliant xenobiologist with credentials that could have secured her a position anywhere in the system. Yet she chose Terminus, the dust ball at the edge of nowhere. My mistake, he said, stepping aside to let her pass. Though I'd argue some of those fungal colonies have distinct personalities. This earned him the briefest flash of a genuine smile before her professional mask slipped back into place. Perhaps you should stick to flying, Captain Vance. Kalen watched her retreating form, noting the perfect posture, the measured steps. Dr. Elara Vance moved like someone who had calculated the precise amount of energy required for each motion. Efficient, economical, and somehow graceful despite it all. The station alert system blared to life before he could reflect further. Attention, all personnel. Micrometeoroid storm approaching. Sector lockdown protocols initiating in 15 minutes. Proceed to your designated safety zones immediately. Kalen swore under his breath. These storms were common enough, but the timing couldn't have been worse. His scheduled departure to pick up supplies from the nearest outpost would now be delayed by at least 12 hours. He turned toward the nearest shelter zone, the auxiliary research facility, when the overhead lights flickered ominously. That wasn't supposed to happen. Terminus's power grid had redundancies upon redundancies. As he rounded the corner toward the shelter, a secondary blast from the emergency system cut through the corridor. Warning. Power fluctuation in sectors 5 through 7. Emergency protocols engaged. The blast doors began to descend ahead of him, threatening to cut off his path to safety. Kalen broke into a sprint, diving beneath the massive metal barrier just before it sealed against the floor. He rolled to his feet, straightening his uniform and finding himself face-to-face with Dr. Elara Vance. She stood alone in the secondary botanical laboratory, her tablet abandoned on a workstation, her eyes fixed on the descending storm shutters covering the lab's exterior windows. Looks like we're stuck together for the duration, Doctor, Kalen said, dusting himself off. Elara startled at his voice, her hand instinctively moving to the communicator at her hip. Captain Vance. Aye. Didn't realize anyone else would make it here. The lab doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss. An emergency lighting system engaged, bathing everything in a soft blue glow. Outside, the first waves of micrometeoroids began to pelt the station's outer hull, creating a sound like distant hail. The joys of Terminus, Kalen said, attempting levity. Luxury accommodations with a symphony of space rocks. Alara didn't reply. She moved to a workstation and began checking the status of several sealed containers housing her specimens. They'll be fine, Kalen said after a moment of awkward silence. These labs are built to withstand more than a little meteor shower. These aren't just specimens, Captain, she replied without looking up. They're potentially the first example of complex photosynthetic organisms that can survive in near-vacuum conditions. Their cellular structure. She stopped herself, her shoulders tensing slightly. But I doubt you're interested in xenobotanical minutiae. Kalen leaned against the counter. Try me, Doctor. We got at least 12 hours to kill. I've heard less interesting conversations in jump space bars. Something in his tone must have surprised her, because she turned to look at him fully for perhaps the first time since they'd met. Her violet eyes searched his face for any sign of mockery, finding none. Very well, she said cautiously. The organisms I'm studying possess a unique photoelectric property. As hours passed, the initial awkwardness between them gradually dissolved. Alara spoke about her research with a passion that transformed her, her hands gesturing animatedly, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Kalen found himself genuinely fascinated, both by the subject and by this glimpse of the woman behind the professional facade. In turn, he shared stories of his travels through the outer systems, the emerald storms of Callisto Prime, the floating cities of New Venice, the bioluminescent oceans of Thalassa, places she had only read about in scientific journals or seen in holograms. What brought you to Terminus? He finally asked during a lull in their conversation. With your qualifications, you could be heading a research team anywhere in the central systems. The light seemed to dim in her eyes. Sometimes the edge of nowhere is exactly where you need to be, Captain. Kalen, he corrected gently. After 6 hours in lockdown, I think we can dispense with formalities. She hesitated, then nodded. Alara, then. So, Alara, he continued, sensing her reluctance to elaborate on her reasons for coming to Terminus. What do you miss most about civilization? Real coffee? Actual weather? Entertainment that isn't decades out of date. A small smile returned to her face. Books, actually. Physical books. I had a collection before. She trailed off. Before, he prompted. Before life took unexpected turns, she finished carefully. Kalen recognized the evasion, but didn't press. Everyone on Terminus had things they preferred not to discuss. He certainly did. A violent tremor suddenly rocked the lab, sending equipment rattling on workbenches. This was no ordinary micrometeoroid impact. That's not right, Kalen said, straightening. The storm shouldn't be causing. A second, more powerful impact cut him off, followed by the shriek of tearing metal somewhere above them. Warning klaxons blared as the emergency lighting flickered. Breach detected in laboratory section. Emergency containment initiating. Kalen's pilot instincts kicked in immediately. We need to move to the inner chamber, he said, grabbing Alara's arm. Now, they were halfway across the lab when a third impact shook the station. Above them, a high-pressure steam conduit running along the ceiling ruptured, sending scalding vapor hissing into the room. Kalen reacted instantly, pushing Alara away from the danger zone, but the force of his movement sent her stumbling against a workbench. Her sleeve caught on a metal fixture and tore open from shoulder to elbow. In the chaos of flashing emergency lights and billowing steam, Kalen reached for her. That's when he saw it. A pattern of intricate blue lines beneath her skin, geometric, precise, almost like circuitry, glowing with an internal light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The luminescence intensified for a split second, then faded as if responding to her sudden surge of adrenaline. Their eyes met, and in hers, Kalen saw naked fear. Alara yanked her arm away, clutching the torn fabric closed with white-knuckled fingers. "You saw nothing," she hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of terror and rage. "Nothing, do you understand?" Before Kalen could respond, the emergency systems stabilized and the immediate danger passed. But something fundamental had changed between them in that instant. A boundary crossed, a secret glimpsed. And Kalen knew instinctively that what he had seen was far more significant than a mere cosmetic modification or unusual scar. The following days were a study in avoidance. Whenever Kalen entered a room, Alara found a reason to leave it. On the rare occasions their duties forced interaction, she was coldly professional, her responses clipped to the bare minimum required. The wall she had begun to lower during their hours in lockdown had been rebuilt, higher and thicker than before. But Kalen couldn't forget what he had seen. The image of those glowing blue patterns haunted him, not out of mere curiosity, but concern. He had witnessed genuine fear in Alara's eyes, and something in him couldn't simply walk away from that. After a week of being systematically avoided, Kalen took matters into his own hands. He used his captain's access codes to pull up Alara's personnel file, a breach of protocol that could cost him his position if discovered. What he found only deepened the mystery. Dr. Alara Vance's file was suspiciously thin. Standard identification data, impressive but vague academic credentials, minimal biographical information. No family contacts, no medical history, no previous employment records. Just enough information to pass a cursory review, but nothing of substance. In Kalen's experience, such conspicuously incomplete files usually meant one of two things: criminal history or corporate cover-up. Kalen dug deeper, tapping into less official channels through contacts he'd maintained from his former life. He searched for information about bioluminescent implants or subcutaneous circuitry patterns matching what he'd seen. Most results pointed to experimental augmentation technology, military applications, black market enhancements, or cutting-edge medical interventions. One name appeared consistently in connection with the most advanced work: Omnicorp Biotechnologies. The megacorporation was officially involved in everything from agricultural development to pharmaceutical research, but rumors had long circulated about their classified divisions. Whispers of human experimentation, of pushing the boundaries between biology and technology without ethical oversight. Nothing concrete enough for authorities to act on, but persistent enough to create a shadow over the company's public facade. As Kalen continued his discreet investigation, he also began watching Alara more carefully from a distance. He noticed things he'd previously overlooked: the way she could access complex systems with unusual speed, her heightened awareness of security protocols, the fact that she never visited the station's medical facilities despite the mandatory monthly checkups for all personnel. His concern deepened when he noticed Boren, Terminus's head of security, taking an interest in Alara as well. The man was notorious for his suspicion of everyone and everything, a byproduct of 15 years working security in the outer systems, where corporate espionage was as common as dust. Kalen observed Boren questioning staff who worked near Alara's lab, reviewing security footage of the botanical research section, even implementing random inspections that seemed to coincide with Alara's research schedule. Something was definitely not right. The catalyst came 3 weeks after the storm incident. Kalen was passing by the botanical lab when he heard raised voices inside. Through the partially open door, he glimpsed Boren looming over Alara, his squat, muscular frame blocking her path to the exit. Unusual power consumption from this section, Boren was saying, his gravelly voice carrying clearly. And strange electromagnetic readings. Care to explain, Dr. Vance? My research requires specialized equipment, Alara replied coolly, though Kalen could hear the tension in her voice. All properly authorized by station administration. Funny thing about authorizations, Boren continued, moving closer to her. They can be revoked when security concerns arise. And I have concerns, Doctor. Many concerns. Kalen didn't hesitate. He strode into the lab, his captain's uniform conferring an authority that even Boren couldn't entirely dismiss. There you are, Dr. Vance, he said briskly. I need your input on the environmental systems for the new expedition. The atmospheric composition readings from the southern crater are giving us trouble. He turned to Boren, his expression neutral, but his eyes hard. Security Chief, I wasn't aware the botanical labs fell under your direct supervision. Boren scowled. Station security is my business, Captain. All of it. Of course, Kalen agreed smoothly. And transportation safety is mine. Dr. Vance's expertise is essential for our upcoming mission. Corporate will be displeased if the schedule is delayed due to administrative distractions. The mention of corporate displeasure had the desired effect. Boren might enjoy wielding his authority, but even he answered to the mining executives who ultimately controlled Terminus. We'll continue our discussion later, Doctor, Boren said, retreating toward the door. His eyes, small and calculating beneath heavy brows, flicked between Kalen and Alara. Captain, after Boren departed, a heavy silence filled the lab. Alara stood motionless by her workstation, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. Thank you, she finally said, the words emerging as if extracted under duress. But there was no need to intervene. I can handle Boren. I've no doubt, Kalen replied. But he's been taking an unusual interest in your work lately. That rarely ends well for anyone on his radar. Alara's fingers played nervously with the edge of her sleeve, the right one, where the fabric had torn during the storm, where Kalen had seen what he wasn't supposed to see. Why are you helping me? She asked abruptly, her violet eyes searching his face. What do you want? The directness of the question caught him off guard. I don't want anything, Alara. But I've seen enough in my time to recognize when someone's in trouble. Whatever you're running from. You know nothing about what I'm running from. She cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. I know it has something to do with what I saw during the storm, Kalen said quietly. And I know Boren won't stop digging until he finds something. He can make life very difficult for you. Alara laughed, a bitter sound entirely devoid of humor. Difficult? He has no concept of difficult. She turned away, her hands braced against her workstation. After a long moment, her shoulders slumped slightly. It wasn't something I chose, she said softly, her back still to him. This, Mark, it was done to me. A project I was involved with, one I tried to leave. Kalen remained silent, sensing she needed space to decide how much to reveal. Omnicorp doesn't permit resignations from certain divisions, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Especially not when you know what I know. If they discover I'm here. She shook her head. This pattern you saw isn't just a scar or an implant. It's a tag, a tracking device, a control mechanism. And if they activate it remotely. She shuddered visibly. Who is they? Kalen asked gently. Alara finally turned to face him. Omnicorp Biotechnologies. Specifically, their Prometheus division. Official mandate. Human enhancement for extreme environments. Actual purpose. She gestured vaguely at herself. Let's just say they're not developing these technologies to help humanity colonize hostile worlds. The pieces were beginning to fit together in Kalen's mind. You were one of their researchers. I was, she acknowledged, until I discovered the true scope of what we were doing, what they were planning to do with our work. Her right hand unconsciously moved to her left arm, with a circuitry pattern lay hidden beneath her sleeve. When I objected, when I threatened to expose them, they decided I would make a suitable test subject instead. The cold calculation of it struck Kalen like a physical blow. And you escaped. Alara nodded. Barely. Changed my identity. Buried myself in the outer systems where corporate oversight is minimal. Terminus was perfect. Remote, focused entirely on mineral extraction. Minimal connection to central networks. But they're still looking for you. They'll never stop looking, she said simply. What they put inside me, it's too valuable and too dangerous if exposed to the public or their competitors. Before Kalen could respond, the station's alert system activated, its calm automated voice at odds with the urgency of its message. Attention, all personnel. Corporate security audit vessel approaching. Docking procedures initiating. All department heads report to central administration for briefing. The color drained from Alara's face. No, she whispered. No, it's too soon. The pattern, it shouldn't have activated enough for them to track me here. Could it be a coincidence? Kalen asked, though he already suspected the answer. Alara's expression told him everything. There were no coincidences when it came to Omnicorp. We need to get you off this station, he said decisively. How? They'll be monitoring all outgoing vessels. Kalen's mind raced through possibilities. Not all of them. I have a cargo shuttle scheduled for maintenance in Base 7. Small, fast, officially non-operational. Hope and doubt warred on Alara's face. Even if we could leave undetected, where would we go? There's nowhere in the system they can't eventually find me with this. She touched her arm again. Is there any way to deactivate it permanently? To remove their ability to track you? Alara hesitated, then spoke carefully. Theoretically, yes. The system operates on a proprietary quantum encryption protocol. If I could access the master server and input a deactivation code keyed to my specific implant signature. But the master server is at Omnicorp headquarters, Kalen surmised. Not exactly, Alara replied, a glimmer of something like hope in her eyes. There's a research vessel, the Icarus, where I worked before this. It was decommissioned after an accident that destroyed most of the evidence of what we were doing. It's been abandoned in the spacecraft graveyard near the outer asteroid belt. The backup servers should still be intact. Kalen nodded slowly. So we need to get to this derelict ship, find the servers, and deactivate your implant. Before Omnicorp catches up to us. Alara's eyebrows lifted in surprise. This isn't your fight, Captain. It became my fight when Boren started targeting you, Kalen replied. And when Omnicorp decided to bring their corporate cleanup operation to my station. The announcement system interrupted them again. Dr. Alara Vance, report to administration for security audit interview. Alara's expression hardened with resolve. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. They'll be searching for me within the hour. Kalen activated his personal comm unit. Jax, I need you to create a system malfunction in cargo processing. Nothing dangerous. Just enough to keep security busy for about 20 minutes. Jax, his longtime mechanic and the closest thing he had to a friend on Terminus, acknowledged without asking questions. In places like this, people learn not to inquire too deeply. Let's move, Kalen said, guiding Alara toward a service corridor that would bypass the main thoroughfares. We've got a narrow window. They navigated through Terminus's labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, avoiding the increasingly frequent security patrols. Kalen's status as a transport captain granted them access to restricted areas that would have been closed to Alara alone, but even his credentials would raise alarms if logged in suspicious patterns. As they approached Base 7, Alara suddenly pulled Kalen into an alcove, pressing them both against the wall as footsteps approached. A security team passed by, led by a woman whose rigid posture and precise movements marked her as something other than standard corporate security. Serafina, Alara breathed, her body tensing against his. Head of Omnicorp's recovery team. Kalen felt Alara trembling slightly, though whether from fear or anger, he couldn't tell. The security team passed without noticing them, and they continued toward the bay. The maintenance shuttle was exactly as Kalen had described, small, nondescript, and officially listed as non-operational. While Alara kept watch, he bypassed the security lockouts and powered up the essential systems. We won't have long before they notice the unauthorized activation, he warned as she slipped into the co-pilot's seat beside him. How good a pilot are you exactly? Alara asked, securing her harness. Kalen's hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency. Good enough to have once been considered for the diplomatic corps' elite escort squadron. A wry smile crossed his face. Before I broke about 17 regulations to save a transport full of refugees that a corrupt admiral had ordered abandoned. Alara studied his profile with new understanding. So that's why you're on Terminus. A hero in exile. Hardly a hero, Kalen replied, initiating the launch sequence. Just someone who couldn't live with the alternative. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, vibrating beneath them. Brace yourself, Kalen warned. This won't be a standard departure protocol. He overrode the bay door's safety interlocks, forcing them open just wide enough for the compact shuttle to squeeze through. Alarms immediately blared throughout the station, but by then, they were already accelerating away from Terminus, the shuttle's enhanced engines, unofficially modified by Jax, pushing them to speeds the vessel specifications claimed were impossible. Behind them, Terminus receded rapidly, its irregular silhouette outlined against the vast emptiness of space. Kalen plotted a course that would take them through the densest part of the nearby asteroid field. A risk, but one that would make tracking them significantly more difficult. "They'll send pursuit craft," Alara said, monitoring the scanner readouts. "Serafina won't give up easily." "Let them come," Kalen replied, his focus absolute as he guided the shuttle between floating boulders that could crush them in an instant. "This route isn't on any standard navigation charts." For nearly an hour, they wove through the asteroid field in tense silence, Kalen's piloting skills pushed to their limits. Alara occasionally provided sensor updates, her voice steady despite the danger. Just as they were approaching the outer edge of the field, the sensors picked up two fast-moving vessels entering the asteroid belt behind them. Omnicorp interceptors, Alara confirmed grimly. Military grade. They're not even pretending this is a corporate security matter anymore. Kalen adjusted their course, taking them deeper into a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. "How much longer to the spacecraft graveyard?" "At our current speed, approximately 40 minutes. Kalen nodded. "They're faster, but they can't match our maneuverability in this environment. We'll stay in the field as long as possible." As they continued their desperate flight, Alara gradually revealed more about Omnicorp's Prometheus project, the experimental program that had marked her, both literally and figuratively. It began as research into enhanced neural interfaces, she explained, her eyes fixed on the scanner displays. Technology that could allow direct communication between human nervous systems and advanced computers. Medical applications, mostly prosthetics that respond like natural limbs, treatments for neurological conditions. But it evolved beyond that, Kalen surmised, executing a tight turn around a slowly tumbling asteroid. Alara nodded. When military contracts entered the picture, priorities shifted. They wanted soldiers who could interface directly with weapons systems, pilots whose reaction times were measured in milliseconds rather than seconds. Her voice grew quieter. Then came the next phase, using the technology not just to connect with external systems, but to fundamentally alter human capabilities, to enhance them, to control them. "And you objected." "I did more than object," she said, a flash of fierce pride showing through her fear. "I gathered evidence, prepared to expose everything. But there was a leak. Someone warned them." Her hand unconsciously moved to her arm, to the hidden circuit patterns beneath her sleeve. "They decided I would make an ideal test subject for the control aspects of the technology. A fitting punishment for my betrayal," they said. The bitterness in her voice made Kalen's chest tighten with anger. "How did you escape?" "The implantation process requires a recovery period during which the neural connections stabilize. They underestimated me, thought I was too sedated, too weakened to resist." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I'd spent 3 years helping design the security systems for the lab. I knew every weakness, every blind spot." Their conversation was interrupted by proximity alerts as one of the pursuing vessels closed the gap, firing warning shots that exploded against nearby asteroids. "They're forcing us out of the field," Kalen growled, hands dancing across the controls as he pushed the shuttle to its limits. "We're almost to the graveyard," Alara said, studying the navigational display. "It's just beyond that planetoid." Kalen executed a series of rapid course changes, using the planetoid's weak gravity to slingshot them forward with increased velocity. The maneuver worked, temporarily increasing the distance between them and their pursuers. The spacecraft graveyard emerged before them, a vast, drifting collection of abandoned vessels ranging from small personal craft to massive freighters and obsolete military ships. Centuries of space travel had left this orbital junkyard filled with the husks of vessels too damaged or outdated to be worth salvaging, yet too expensive to completely dismantle. There, Elara pointed to a section of the graveyard where a research vessel drifted among the wreckage. It was smaller than Kalen had expected, sleek despite the visible damage to its port side. The name Icarus was barely visible on its scarred hull. "Can you identify a viable docking point?" Kalen asked, scanning the derelict ship. Elara leaned forward, studying the vessel that had once been both her workplace and prison. The auxiliary research bay on the starboard side should still be intact. Its airlock systems were designed to function on emergency power indefinitely. As they approached the Icarus, their pursuers emerged from behind the planetoid. Warning shots streaked past the shuttle, closer this time, no longer meant merely to intimidate. "They're done playing games," Kalen observed grimly, initiating docking procedures with the abandoned research vessel. "How long will you need inside to deactivate the implant?" "Assuming the servers are intact and I can access them, 10 minutes, maybe 15. Alara's expression was tense, but determined. "But Serafina will know exactly why we've come here. This is where she'll make her stand." The shuttle shuddered as its docking mechanism engaged with the Icarus's airlock. Atmospheric readings indicated the research vessel still maintained minimal life support, enough oxygen to breathe, though the temperature was well below comfortable levels. "I'll hold them off as long as I can," Kalen promised, retrieving an energy pistol from the shuttle's emergency kit. "You focus on the servers." They sealed their environment suits, protection against both the cold and any potential hazards aboard the abandoned vessel, and cycled through the airlock. The Icarus's interior was a study in shadows and silence, emergency lighting providing just enough illumination to navigate by. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "This way," Elara said, leading them through corridors that still bore signs of a hasty evacuation. Personal items abandoned, equipment left unsecured. They passed laboratories with shattered sample containers and offices with screens still powered by the ship's minimal emergency systems. In one room, Kalen glimpsed what appeared to be medical equipment, or perhaps something more sinister. Restraint systems integrated into examination tables. Monitoring devices unlike any standard medical gear he'd encountered. Elara didn't pause to look. "The server room is 2 levels down. We need to hurry." They had just reached the central stairwell when the ship's structure vibrated with the unmistakable sound of forced docking. Their pursuers had arrived. "Go," Kalen urged, taking up a defensive position at the top of the stairs. "I'll slow them down." Elara hesitated, her expression conflicted behind her suit's faceplate. "Kalen, if anything happens—" "It won't," he cut her off. "We're both walking out of here. Now go." She nodded once, then descended the stairs rapidly, her footsteps receding into the depths of the ship. Kalen configured his energy pistol to a wide dispersal setting, not lethal, but powerful enough to incapacitate, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. The distant sound of an airlock cycling reached his ears, followed by the measured tread of multiple sets of footsteps. Kalen retreated to a position with better cover, his back to a structural support column that offered both protection and a clear line of sight to the corridor. The first figures that appeared wore the sleek black tactical gear of Omnicorp's private security force. Their helmets featured enhanced scanning technology, and their weapons were definitely not the standard-issue fare of corporate enforcers. They moved with military precision, checking corners and maintaining formation. Behind them came a woman whose presence commanded attention despite her slight frame. She wore a form-fitting environmental suit without a helmet, apparently unconcerned about the ship's conditions. Her platinum hair was pulled back in a severe knot, emphasizing sharp features and eyes so pale they appeared almost colorless in the emergency lighting. "Captain Vance," she called out, her voice carrying easily through the silent corridor. "I am Agent Serafina Kell, Omnicorp Asset Recovery. You are interfering with a corporate security operation and harboring a fugitive. Surrender now, and we can resolve the situation without further complications." Kalen remained silent, using the moment to assess their numbers. 6 security operatives plus Serafina herself. Odds he didn't like, but it faced worse. "Your silence is noted," Captain, Serafina continued, seemingly untroubled by his lack of response. But unnecessary. We know exactly where Dr. Vance is going and why. She signaled to her team, who began to spread out, preparing to advance. This ship holds no secrets from me. I supervised the project that created her enhancements. That explained the personal interest, Kalen thought. This wasn't just a recovery mission for Serafina. It was about claiming credit for bringing back a valuable test subject. She's not your property, Kalen called back, his voice echoing in the metal corridor. She's a human being who didn't consent to being experimented on. Serafina's laugh was like ice cracking. Consent? How quaint. Dr. Vance forfeited any rights when she attempted to sabotage years of revolutionary research. She took a step forward, her pale eyes scanning the shadows where Kalen was concealed. You don't understand what she carries within her, Captain. It's not just an implant. It's the future of human evolution. The next step in our species' development. Funny how the next step always involves control and exploitation, Kalen replied, adjusting his position slightly. Rather than actual freedom. Freedom is inefficient, Serafina said dismissively. Structure creates progress. Now, enough philosophy. She gestured to her team. Find them. The doctor is the priority. She must be taken alive. The captain is expendable. The security team moved forward with practice coordination. Kalen waited until they committed to their advance, then fired a rapid series of shots, forcing them to scatter for cover. In the confusion, he retreated toward a side corridor that would allow him to circle around and follow Alara's path to the server room. The ship's layout was labyrinthine, designed with compartmentalization in mind, appropriate for a facility conducting classified research. Kalen used this to his advantage, setting impromptu traps by sealing doors behind him or creating diversions with targeted shots at power conduits. Each delay bought Alara more precious minutes with the servers. He had just reached the level where the server room was located when the ship's remaining intercom system suddenly crackled to life. Serafina's voice echoed through the corridors, calm and clinical. Dr. Vance, I know you can hear me. Your implant control protocols are still accessible remotely. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. A moment later, Kalen heard a scream of pain from somewhere ahead. Alara's voice, distorted by agony. He broke into a run, following the sound to a sealed doorway marked Data Core, authorized personnel only. Inside, Alara was slumped against a central console, her face contorted in pain, her left arm clutched against her chest. The circuits beneath her skin were visible through the torn fabric of her suit, pulsing with an angry blue light. Alara, Kalen rushed to her side, supporting her as she struggled to remain upright. It's a pain induction protocol, she gasped, her voice raw. They can't maintain it for long at this distance. The quantum entanglement degrades. She straightened with visible effort, turning back to the console she'd been working on before the attack. I'm almost there. Just need to access the primary control matrix. Kalen positioned himself by the door, weapon ready. How much longer? 5 minutes. Maybe less. Her fingers flew over the interface, navigating through layers of security protocols with the ease of someone who had helped design them. The system still recognizes my biometric signature. They never thought I'd make it back here. Through the door, Kalen could hear the approaching footsteps of Serafina's team. They weren't bothering with stealth anymore. They knew exactly where their quarry was. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, he urged, sealing the door and using his energy pistol to fuse the locking mechanism. It wouldn't hold them for long, but every second counted. Alara nodded, her focus absolute as she delved deeper into the system. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the ship's cold atmosphere, a testament to both her concentration and the lingering effects of the pain induction. There, she said finally, a note of triumph in her voice. I've located my specific implant signature. Now, I just need to execute the deactivation sequence. And the ship shuddered as something heavy slammed against the sealed door. Metal groaned in protest. They're using breaching charges, Kalen warned, taking up position behind a server bank that offered both cover and a clear line of fire to the door. Almost there, Elara murmured, fingers dancing across the interface. The deactivation requires a full system purge, including all remote access protocols. Once I initiate it, there's no going back. Another impact rocked the door, bending the metal inward. It wouldn't withstand another hit. Do it, Kalen said. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Alara's eyes met his for a brief, intense moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Trust, perhaps, or something deeper that neither had time to acknowledge. She nodded once, then executed the command sequence. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The circuitry pattern on her arm flared with blinding intensity. The blue light suddenly shot through with tendrils of gold and crimson. Alara cried out, her back arching in pain as the implant systems began to shut down, severing connections that had been integrated with her nervous system. Just as she collapsed to her knees, the door finally gave way. Serafina stood in the breach, flanked by her remaining security team, her pale eyes widening at the sight of the console's display. System purge complete. Remote access terminated. No! Serafina's composure shattered. Stop the purge. Override it now. But it was too late. The damage was done. The server systems were already beginning to erase themselves, failsafes activated by Alara's commands. Kalen didn't hesitate. He fired a rapid succession of shots, forcing Serafina and her team back through the doorway. In the chaos, he made his way to Alara, who was struggling to stand, her breathing ragged but her eyes clear and focused. Did it work? He asked, supporting her weight as they moved toward an emergency exit at the rear of the server room. Alara nodded, a mixture of pain and elation on her face. It's done. The neural connections are severing. They can't track me anymore. They can't control me. The secondary exit led them to a maintenance corridor that stretched toward the ship's aft section. Behind them, Serafina was ordering her team to pursue, her voice shrill with fury. There's an emergency escape pod in the research director's office, Alara said, her strength returning as they moved. 2 levels up, starboard side. If it's still functional. It's our best shot, Kalen agreed, helping her navigate the darkened corridors. They found the office untouched since the ship's abandonment. Personal items still scattered across the desk, as if their owner had just stepped out momentarily. The escape pod access was concealed behind a false wall panel, a private exit for the privileged few who ran the Icarus project. Standard protocols should have preserved its functionality, Alara said as they cycled through the small airlock into the pod. These were designed to remain operational for decades. The pod systems responded sluggishly to initialization commands, but they came online. Basic life support, minimal navigation, and enough thrust to reach a nearby outpost or settlement. It would have to do. As Kalen prepared the launch sequence, a shadow fell across the pod's small viewport. Serafina stood in the office, alone, her security team nowhere in sight. Her expression was no longer one of cold control, but of desperate rage. You've destroyed years of work, she called through the communication system, her voice distorted by static. Do you understand what you've done? The setback to human advancement? The loss to science? There was nothing scientific about what you were doing, Alara responded, her voice steady. Science serves humanity, not the other way around. Serafina laughed, a hollow sound. Such idealism. It would be admirable if it weren't so catastrophically misguided. She moved closer to the viewport, her pale eyes locked on Alara. This isn't over, Alara. The implant may be deactivated, but it's still inside you. Its secrets, its potential, all still there, waiting to be reclaimed. Not by you, Kalen interjected, finalizing the launch sequence. Not by Omnicorp. The pod's engines hummed to life, vibrating beneath them as the docking clamps prepared to release. Serafina stepped back, her composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. Run if you must, she said softly. But remember, Omnicorp's reach is vast, and its memory long. And she placed a hand against the viewport, her fingers splayed as if trying to grasp something just beyond reach. I never forget what's mine. The escape pod ejected from the Icarus with a violent jolt, spinning briefly before its stabilizers engaged. Through the viewport, they watched as the research vessel receded into the distance, a dark silhouette against the vast starscape. She won't give up, Ilaris said quietly. Ever. Then we'll have to stay one step ahead, Kalen replied, setting a course for a small, independent outpost he knew in a neighboring system. Together, for the first time since they'd fled Terminus, Ilara truly smiled, a genuine expression that reached her unusual violet eyes. Together, she agreed, her hand finding his across the control panel. I never expected to have an ally in this fight. Thank you for seeing me, the real me, beyond the secret you uncovered. We both know something about starting over, Kalen said, returning her smile. About second chances. As the escape pod accelerated away from the spacecraft graveyard, leaving behind the ghosts of the past and the immediate threat of pursuit, a fragile sense of possibility bloomed between them. Whatever came next, and they harbored no illusions about the difficulties ahead. They would face it as a unit forged in crisis and cemented by choice. The journey to the outpost was tense but uneventful. The pod's limited systems couldn't detect whether they were being pursued, but Kalen's extensive knowledge of obscure navigation routes kept them well away from standard patrol patterns and commercial lanes. Ilara spent much of the journey examining her arm, where the circuitry pattern had dimmed to a faint silver tracery beneath her skin, still visible, but no longer active. Occasionally she winced, experiencing what she described as phantom signals, as her nervous system adjusted to the severed connections. It will fade with time, she explained, tracing the intricate patterns with her fingertip. The physical circuits will remain, but without the quantum connection to the servers, they're just scars now. Memories. Does it still hurt? Kalen asked, watching her with concern. Less each hour, she replied. It's strange. I've carried this for so long, been defined by it, hunted because of it. Now it's just decoration. They reached the outpost, little more than a collection of habitation modules attached to a small mining operation, 3 days after their escape from the Icarus. Plies Point, as it was called, existed in a legal gray area, technically beyond the jurisdiction of any major corporate entity, but too small to warrant official attention. Its residents asked few questions of newcomers, concerned only with whether they could contribute something useful to the community's survival. Kalen's reputation as a skilled pilot secured them temporary lodging and basic supplies in exchange for his help maintaining the outpost's small fleet of mining craft. Ilara's expertise in biological systems proved valuable in optimizing the station's hydroponic gardens, which had been struggling under the care of engineers with limited botanical knowledge. Weeks passed, then months. They established new identities, careful to maintain a low profile. The fear of discovery never entirely disappeared, but it receded enough to allow space for other things, for conversations that had nothing to do with survival, for laughter, for dreams of something beyond the next day. One evening, 6 months after their arrival at Plies Point, Kalen returned from a supply run to find Ilara standing by the small viewport in their shared quarters, gazing out at the stars. The silver tracery on her arm caught the light as she turned to greet him. I've been thinking, she said without preamble, about the research I was doing before. Everything. The original work before Omnicorp corrupted it. Kalen set down his bag, giving her his full attention. The neural interfaces for medical applications? She nodded. There are colonies in the outer reach with limited medical resources. Places where even basic prosthetics are luxury items. But with what I know, what I've learned, I can make a difference there. It would mean leaving the relative safety of Plies Point, Kalen observed, though his tone held no objection. Potentially increasing our visibility. Yes, Ilara acknowledged. But hiding indefinitely isn't really living, is it? She moved closer to him, taking his hands in hers. We've both spent enough time running from our pasts. Maybe it's time to start running towards something instead. Kalen studied her face, the determination in her unusual eyes, the quiet strength that had carried her through unimaginable ordeals. In the months they'd spent together, his admiration had deepened into something far more profound. What had begun as an unlikely alliance had transformed into the most significant relationship of his life. The outer reach, he mused, a slow smile spreading across his face. They always need good pilots out there. Dangerous territory, minimal oversight, perfect for a couple of fugitives with useful skills and questionable pasts. Alara's expression brightened with hope. "You'd come with me? Try to stop me," he replied simply, drawing her into his arms. Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness, planning their journey to the colonies of the outer reach, Alara traced the outline of Kalen's profile with gentle fingers. "When you saw my scar that day during the storm," she whispered, "I was terrified. I never imagined it would lead to this, to freedom." Kalen caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Some secrets, once uncovered, change everything. For the better," she added, nestling closer to him. "For the better," he agreed, his arms tightening around her as they gazed out at the vast expanse of stars, no longer symbols of isolation and danger, but of possibility and promise. A future neither of them had dared to imagine, born from a moment of accidental discovery and the courage to face what came after. 1 year later, on a small frontier colony at the edge of known space, a modest medical clinic opened its doors. Its specialization in neurological treatments and advanced prosthetics quickly earned it a reputation among the scattered settlements of the outer reach. The doctor who ran it, a woman with unusual violet eyes and a faint silver tracery on her left arm, worked alongside a former transport captain whose piloting skills ensured that even the most remote colonies received regular visits from their mobile medical unit. They lived quietly but purposefully, their shared history a foundation for the life they built together. And if corporate vessels occasionally appeared in nearby systems, conducting what they claimed were routine surveys, the doctor and the pilot simply moved on to the next colony, always one step ahead, always together. The secret that had once threatened Alara's life had become instead the key to her purpose, and to a love that neither of them had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. In the vastness of space, they had found each other. In doing so, found themselves.